Hello and welcome to the Soccer Business Podcast. I'm Simon Evans, and this is a news review episode of this pod, and we're looking at the big decisions that came out of the MLS Board of Governors meeting in Palm Beach, Florida on Thursday. We're looking at those with Alex Silverman from the Sports Business Journal, who was at that meeting, breaking news around two big stories, really, the change of season to MLS, which we'll get onto in the second part of this pod, and of course the really interesting reworking of the MLS Apple deal. Alex, thanks very much for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Simon. Good to be back. Always nice to debrief after these major meetings and news events with you.
The Apple issue is one that's been lingering around for a long time. We've heard grumbles of discontent from some people inside the game, a lot of criticism from fans, questions from within the industry about whether the deal was working at all, how long would it last, and so on. And then we get this change, which is basically the MLS content moving out from its own paywall and just living on the Apple TV as part of the subscription that includes all the other entertainment and content that Apple have. What was the rationale given for that decision?
Yeah, I mean, I think it definitely was aimed at making, getting more eyeballs on the games. Being behind, some people have referred to it as a double paywall. I don't necessarily love that terminology because you could, of course, subscribe to Season Pass without subscribing to Apple TV. But the value proposition, when you compare paying for just MLS to, being able to subscribe to Peacock for less and get EPL plus everything that's on there. Same with UEFA Champions League and Paramount Plus or ESPN Plus with La Liga. I think they realized that it wasn't a, competitive value proposition. And so I also think, when we talked to Don Garber, he also framed it from the sense that this is something that Apple wanted because it allows them to, with F1 coming in, it allows them to sort of present their main subscription offering now as a true sports bundle between F1 and MLS and some MLB games. They're starting to put together a package of sports like some of their competitors. So I think in that sense, it kind of made sense for both sides. So I think that's kind of why they did it.
Yeah, it's an interesting one, isn't it? When you mentioned the bundle that they're doing with Peacock, I think it goes from, is it $99 for the Apple package on its own, and then $14.99 if you go in with Peacock. But if you look at what Peacock brings to that package as a sports fan, you're then getting from Apple, F1, MLS, everything for the US market, and obviously Apple and MLS is global. You've got, as you said, some select Major League Baseball games, but then from NBC, you've got the Premier League content, you've got PGA Tour Golf, you've got NBA. I mean, for $15, that's quite a chunky sports package that the consumer can access alongside something like ESPN, and you're pretty much getting towards being covered.
Yeah, and, it's funny, when this news came out yesterday, when Paul Tenorio reported it first and then I reported it, neither of us had actually mentioned in our pieces that the Peacock bundle, like, it was kind of something that we had overlooked, and we saw you mention that on Twitter. I'm curious to see how much promotion that gets because, like you said, that is a really compelling value proposition. If you're going to subscribe to Apple TV, it's only, like you said, an extra couple bucks to get Peacock with it and vice versa now. So it'll be interesting to see how much Comcast, NBC, and Apple lean into promoting it as a bundle versus, just promoting their own individual products.
Yeah, and you wonder if that price point will stay where it is.
Yeah.
Not necessarily just because of MLS, but if you add MLS and F1 in there as well, and you're a Peacock subscriber, and you can see why they might want to move that price point up a little bit. But who knows? I mean, if it's an eyeballs battle that's going on, it is, that's doing that for a year might be a really good way of tying people in and getting them used to that content.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, from a consumer point of view, I mean, it just looks like good news all round for if you're a soccer fan. If you're watching the Premier League on NBC for a small amount more, you can now get MLS and vice versa. And also just purely some of the the things that I immediately thought might be negatives, such as the season ticket holders at MLS clubs were all given MLS season pass as part of their package for the season. So they would have free TV coverage as well as the in-stadium experience. And I was like, now they're going to have to pay for Apple TV. No, they're going to cover that. They're going to include Apple TV as part of the season ticket deal. So they seem to have really gone out of their way with this deal to make the consumer have that attractive package, get rid of some of those points that people felt were friction that was stopping them watching MLS. I mean, Merritt Paulson, I saw in your piece, was saying he expects to double the audience. I mean, we still don't really know what size the audience was on MLS Season Pass, and I suspect we never will do. But does doubling sound realistic to you?
I don't know. It's really hard to say because, like you said, we don't have the level of transparency with what it was already. I mean, we kind of know. My understanding is, just based on, they said that they were doing 3.7 million this past year for an entire weekend slate of games, which, isn't exactly the standard way of reporting these things. But if you kind of break that down, you're looking at, 200,000 to 300,000 viewers globally per weekend match. Garber said at All-Star that they were looking at 120,000 viewers on average per match. So we don't have a great grasp on it still, I would say. But, there are numbers that wouldn't be crazy to double, I would say.
Yeah.
I think if you're a fan of MLS already, I think you've probably been fairly happy with Apple. Everything's in one place. The production quality is really strong. I think the issue is more just on the growth side of things, getting eyeballs on the product. This is a pivotal time for the league in terms of growth with the World Cup coming to North America next year, with Messi being in the league right now, and, some other big name players now with Son and Mueller coming over. So I think they want more eyeballs on the product, and it's unclear exactly what this move means for the overall structure of the deal. And we published a subsequent piece this morning based on a conversation that we had with Don Garber on the ground yesterday after the meetings, where he basically said both the financials and the length of the Apple deal have been adjusted as part of this move.
Right.
That is interesting. I mean, under the previous deal, it was 10 years, so running through 2032, and $250 million a year for a total of $2.5 billion. Under those terms, they were able to get additional revenue, potentially by driving a certain number of subscriptions that they had never managed to reach with Season Pass. But with Season Pass being scrapped, I mean, it stands to reason that that incentive is either probably out of the picture altogether now, or, considerably more limited, because I don't know how you would really attribute certain subscribers to MLS. But, I don't know. I wonder if the kind of base economics of the deal, the $250 million a year, has changed at all. We don't really have clarity on that yet. But he did acknowledge, definitively that the length of the deal has changed, though he didn't want to go into how. He just said
I would presume
shorter, you would have to think. But I have to figure out, I think the question is, how do you go from a discussion about changing the distribution model to changing the length of the deal? I think that's interesting. Something that I have to imagine that, even if the commissioner is not going to give us that information will emerge at some point. So, yeah, I mean, I think there's still, like most things with this deal, there's still more questions than answers. But overall, I think it's a smart move for the league. I think it makes sense for Apple, and I think it's good for fans who will now get access to this other Apple TV programming.
Yeah, and I think it's great news for the consumer. It's interesting, the revenue part of it, isn't it? Because you would maybe speculate and think that if they're being removed from a revenue share option, that maybe there's some compensation for that in the annual amount that they get. But then again, who knows what the conversations were? I mean, Apple might have been disappointed by the numbers.
I mean, there was no indication that they were actually reaching that threshold where they would have gotten additional revenue sharing for driving, subscriptions. So if they weren't getting it anyway, I can imagine that they might just say, hey, we'll do away with this revenue sharing uh, incentive.
Yeah.
When we assess whether this was the prudent move or not for them to go with that, but, looking back on 2022 when they were in the market with their rights, you have to remember kind of what their other options were. And this deal was far and away their best financial option. However, when you divide $250 million, when you take $250 million a year, you subtract production costs, which are in the tens of millions of dollars, and then divide that by 30 teams, you're still under $10 million, well under $10 million per team, which, pales in comparison to what other global soccer leagues are getting for their media rights.
Yeah, right.
So I think they have to take a longer term outlook on this. Don Garber has said, and, kind of said yesterday that, the underpinning of professional sports economics is media. And so we have to grow media. So even if this move means they don't get this revenue sharing option anymore, even if, and we don't know this to be the case, but even if the base economics of the deal aren't what they were previously, they need to take a longer term view. And I think the best thing they can do to increase their long term media rights value is to just get more eyeballs on the product.
Yeah, I think so. And if our guess that the length of the contract has been reduced and that maybe in 2 or 3 years, for example, MLS could get out of this deal or the deal ends,
Mm-hmm.
MLS would be looking to use that time to get themselves in a position where if they go to market again, that maybe some of the other streamers and broadcasters are going to look at them with different eyes, especially if they've had that post-World Cup growth that they're hoping for. And, with the new stadiums coming online and the whole MLS 3.0 and the season and everything else, and after the Messi effect has had time to sort of I had another couple of years of it, with the contract. I mean, that must have been, I would imagine, a part of this discussion as well. The Messi deal, keeping him in the league, because you can imagine it would have been a quite different negotiation if Messi hadn't renewed his contract and he was about to play his final game in MLS.
Right. Yeah, I mean,
I wonder as well whether, this. You hear a lot of people in the media rights world talking about how Apple has a different way of judging the success of their broadcast deals than a lot of other broadcasters. They're less worried about the short-term revenue and less concerned and more about building their ecosystem and bringing people into an ecosystem that, as we know, involves way more than broadcasting. So you can see why this makes sense for Apple as well. So it's an interesting one, and it keeps open the possibility that it might evolve again. I mean, I guess there's still some questions. They did quite a lot of work to get distribution via DirecTV and Comcast, I think, as well. You wonder, that was basically purchasing MLS Season Pass through those networks. Now, that probably doesn't exist, right? You would think.
I don't know. I think they might still find a way to get. I mean, they had games on Comcast were free for Comcast subscribers.
The Sunday game.
The Sunday game.
Yeah.
I would imagine that, they could still keep something like that in place. Yeah, I don't know. We'll have to follow up to see if this change, curtails their ability to kind of do some of these separate distribution experiments deals. The other interesting thing for MLS is that their only linear deal with Fox expires after next season. But, that's going to be an interesting thing to watch as well. And but ultimately with this media rights, media value stuff, it does come down to improving the product on the pitch. And I think, maybe that is a bit of a segue to the other announcement from yesterday with the schedule change.
I think you're doing my job for me there, Alex. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. It is the perfect segue to it. I mean, this was a decision. We spent some time together in Austin at the All-Star game where it had been trailed that there might be a vote on that decision. There had been a previous occasion where there was going to be a vote on the decision. They seemed to be working through things. Never really got the feeling that was off the table or was really in danger of not happening. It's now happening, and we did get a date, 27-28 season, with a mini season in after the conclusion of the 26th season. Will then be what was the term they used for it?
The sprint season.
Sprint season, a bit like the NASCAR playoffs.
Right.
Yeah.
So that'll be 14 regular season games plus.
Right. So, and then we go straight into. So they've missed that window to make this change straight after the World Cup, but they kind of admitted that already. I think at the last time we talked to them.
Yeah. I mean, I do think that we'll never know how much more of an impact some of these changes could have had if they happened right after the World Cup. But you can sort of imagine if they were able to say coming out of the World Cup, this is the new MLS.
Yeah.
I think that would have been a great promotional opportunity for them. But yeah, they're going to have to wait until 2027. They're going to have to do this kind of mini season in between. So, it's going to be it's going to be an interesting transition.
So it seems like that, and in the end, the northern clubs, the cold weather markets that had been maybe dragging their feet about this or uncomfortable with this, something has happened or some things have happened to get them on board with it. Garber was very keen, I think, throughout this process that it not be a case of just getting the minimum number of votes required. He really wanted everyone behind this. It looks like that happened. Is that the impression you got yesterday?
I don't think it was unanimous. Nelson Rodriguez said that, I believe the word he used was resounding support. I asked him, does that mean it was unanimous? And he said, we don't disclose, the details of our votes. And then, Garber was asked the same question of whether it was unanimous during his on-camera press conference, and he said we don't talk about what happens inside our board meetings. So, I take that to mean that they probably had 28, 29 votes. It seems like there was probably one or two holdouts. I don't want to speculate as to who they were. There were some of the northern teams that were, outwardly saying that they thought that the benefits to the league outweighed the potential weather concerns. NYCFC was an especially vocal, northern based team that was in favor of this move. So they definitely had some support from some of the northern teams. But yeah, it seems like there might have been one or two that are kind of being dragged into it.
And again, going back to that All-Star gathering in Austin, I remember one of the people we talked to saying that, in the end, it might not look too much different from what we have now, in that there will be a winter break that ensures that in the really cold parts of December and January and early February, there isn't MLS soccer going on.
Mm-hmm.
And that really what you're doing here, I've seen the figure, 91% of the games will be in the same periods of time.
That's what they said, yeah.
Yeah.
I have to get a little bit of clarity on whether they mean that 91% of the games will be at, in the same window, or just like 91% of the footprint of the season will be the same, because obviously now, yes, you have playoff games in November under the current schedule, but it's a lot fewer games than if you have every team playing.
Yeah.
Oh, it's probably easier to get somebody to come out to a game in November in cold weather if it's a late round playoff game than a mid-season.
Right. And if you're Toronto, you don't make the playoffs, you're not playing in November, December at all, right? So
Right.
yeah.
Right. And they obviously they had MLS Cup up there 2018, I want to say 2019, and it was
Yeah, I was at that one.
freezing,
It was cold.
as you know. So yeah, they're trying to downplay the weather thing. I don't know. I think it'll be interesting to see whether, some of these teams have to make infrastructure investments to be able to train more routinely in cold weather, whether that be indoor training facilities, heated fields. I'm going to have to kind of do an account, go team by team and figure out who has indoor fields and who doesn't. And I think they're going to have to figure out what they're going to do during that winter break to keep their players in shape. They alluded to there potentially being some kind of competitions in that window, even if it's not league matches. So there's still some unanswered questions.
Yeah.
But yeah, they're kind of downplaying the weather impact.
Yeah, and I think the interesting thing is that there's always something about MLS that's going to be different from the rest of the world. Germany and other countries in Europe do have a winter break, but it's 2 or 3 weeks.
Right.
This is a long break. This is a break as long as an off season, really. And the question there would be, I mean, are you just really switching out the same break and calling it the end of one season and start of another at the moment, or a mid-season break in the future.
I mean, yeah, the winter break, I guess, essentially will be basically the same length as the off season
Exactly.
between MLS Cup and the start of the next season, right? Because the MLS Cup will be in, late May, and then the next season will start in mid-July.
Yeah.
So yeah, kind of about the same length of time.
Yeah, so you're looking at that and thinking, okay, fine, that's a long break. I mean, for players to stay fit through that break with no games would be, they're having a break. They're going to be having a break. Now it does make me wonder if you couldn't do Leagues Cup in January, February, played in southern markets, or warm.
Yeah, Mexico maybe finally.
Yeah, possibly. I mean, I know in the past we've seen in Europe some markets, Russia and I think Germany did it as well, where they had indoor tournaments for fun, like
Hmm.
during those breaks. But I'm pretty sure MLS will want to do something in that way. I don't think they want to go dark for 2 months in the middle of their season.
No, and I think that's part of what they're still discussing with the players union. I mean, they said in their release, and it was actually surprisingly high up in the release, I thought, that they've agreed to work on the transition with the union, which basically, I guess, means that the union's on board with cooperating towards this, even though all the details aren't hammered out yet. But, yeah, I think the players are still going to want a certain amount of consecutive time off like they have under the current schedule. So it'll be interesting. One thing I wonder about is, over the past few years, their preseason, they've this Coachella Valley Invitational out in Palm Springs, California, has, that's kind of been where teams have started to go for their preseason training, especially teams that are in cold markets. Does maybe something like that get moved into the winter break now? Because, you're not going to have you're not going to have a preseason tournament in in the desert in California in June or whatever. So
Yeah.
maybe AEG, who owns the Galaxy and runs that tournament, tries to establish that as a winter break sort of thing.
Yeah, could be something like that, or some version. The MLS is back that they did in Orlando, didn't they? In the
And
bubble that they created, that kind of format can work as for a cup competition or a mini tournament of some sort.
yeah, and I mean, you could see, I don't know, maybe teams go on tour abroad. I don't know how that would work with the union and, collective bargaining, but, that's I guess a possibility. I do think they are still leaning towards doing Leagues Cup in kind of a similar time of year under the new calendar. That would be early in the season. So like in the summer, in midweek games, kind of like what they did this year, except this year was in the middle of the season. Now it would be at the
Yeah,
beginning of the season. I still think that's the way they're leaning, based on what Nelson Rodriguez told us yesterday. Um, they also acknowledge that, yeah, a Leagues Cup could maybe or be in that winter break.
or part of it. You could maybe do the group stages then, and then go to the knockout stuff later in the season, as the midweek games or something like that. There's a few options there, aren't there? I mean, going
Yeah.
back to the arguments for this were always heavily focused on the transfer windows and the fact that now aligns is like a major boost for clubs who are not going to have to be going for building their new season roster and trying to tempt players away from Europe in the middle of their season. That's no longer an issue. Everyone's going to be building rosters at the same time and trading at the same time. So you can see all the wins and the benefits there. Beyond that, though, big picture, MLS 3.0, growing the game. Do you think this is going to have a significant impact on the popularity of MLS by moving it away from being a summer sport effectively?
I think it only has a big impact if it's done in conjunction with some of these other pillars of MLS 3.0, which, mainly the changes to allow, more spending on rosters.
Yeah.
And, I think Garber said, we'd like to have, uh, you know, we'd like to have this new regular season format in place in 2027. That we can get back to that maybe in a second. But they want to have these new roster rules in place. They kind of want this to be a new league that they roll out in 27, 28. And I think that doing this on its own, I don't know if that is enough to really grab the attention of the American sports fan
Mm,
or a soccer fan who thinks that MLS isn't worth watching. I think you still need to kind of improve the caliber of players on the pitch.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's a good step. I think it's a positive step, but I don't think it's a game changer.
And certainly the windows will help them improve the quality of players on the
Right,
pitch.
right.
So that's part of it. But yeah, I think, it only helps so much if you're limited in what you can spend on players in the transfer windows.
The final area you touched upon it there is the change to the structure. There've been speculation. I wrote a thought piece, like an imagined future, a sort of fantasy reform, if you like, of MLS a few months ago, putting it into NFL divisions based on geography, which it seems is basically what they're going to go for, in part at least. So as I understand,
Seemingly. So
yeah,
just to kind of be clear on what we found out yesterday and what we didn't find out yesterday, they acknowledged that they voted on a new regular season competition format. However, they did not reveal any details of what that format is, because they say we don't want to reveal the new regular season format until we've come up with the coinciding playoff format. But Paul Tenorio on Wednesday reported basically this is exactly the format that they are voting on. He's a very good reporter. I think he's probably well informed. And like you said, that format does involve the single table, moving away from conference-based standings towards a single table, and then having geographic divisions.
yeah. I think the geographic divisions things make sense. I mean, you lock in those rivalry games, then you're guaranteed every year. And I suppose by getting away from the East and West Conference, depending on how they organize the scheduling, it does open up the possibility of more East-West regular season games as well, you would think.
Yeah, I mean, I think the way Paul laid it out is you would play, so there'll be 5 divisions with 6 teams each. You'll play each team in your division home and away, so that's 10 games. And then every other team you'll play either home or away. Essentially, you're playing every team in the league once, with the exception of your division opponents that you'd play twice, and that comes out to the 34 games that they currently play. So yeah, I mean, I think it makes a lot of sense. You'll kind of, well, I don't know if you'll actually cut down on overall travel. I mean, obviously your division opponents will presumably be the ones that are closest to you, but you'll also be playing every team in the opposite conference now. So I'm not sure whether that will net out to be less overall travel. The interesting thing and I was talking to Paul about this yesterday, is, do these divisions, aside from being kind of a scheduling mechanism, do they mean anything in terms of competition? Or are they going to is the league going to try and get fans to get excited about, oh, we can win the division this year. We can get a division, we can win our division, because, maybe you do something where if you win your division, you qualify for the playoffs automatically, but if you win your division, you're probably already qualifying for the playoffs. So yeah,
but
it'll be
could have a week. You could technically have a weak division where the winner didn't get enough to finish in that position in the single
possibly
table.
depending on possibly
Unlikely,
but so it'll be interesting to see how they sort of position it. Do they position it as, this is just a scheduling mechanism, these divisions, or do they try and get people to get excited about division races and that kind of thing?
Come on, it's MLS. We know what they're going to do. It's going to be the race to be the champion of the Southeast. As Orlando, Miami, Atlanta, right, and Charlotte, and who else would be in that? Yeah, but
yeah,
it's
Nashville, maybe, I don't know, but yeah,
Atlanta.
Yeah.
I like it. I do like that. I think it gives you.
Yeah, I just think you need to find a way to make winning the division matter. So, obviously in the NFL, you get, top 4 seed, you get a higher seed, and you get home field in the first round automatically by winning your division. Maybe they do something like that.
Yeah.
It's going to depend on what the playoff format looks like. And there's been it doesn't seem like they've narrowed in on one yet.
No.
I don't know if you've heard they talked about this Australian rules playoff format. I don't know.
Where you play off for the.
Yeah, I don't have honestly a great understanding of how it works, but that was apparently something that they were very keen on it at one point in discussions. Not sure if that's still kind of the way they're leaning.
Garber did say, again in Austin, he did say that it would be a format unique to North American
sports. Yeah, I think at that point they were really honed in on this Australian rules football format, which, I don't know, maybe you can explain it?
Perhaps not. If I mean, to some, I think it gives the high seeds a second chance, basically.
Yes, correct.
Yeah,
So yeah, if the high seed lose, then they go to sort of an elimination game against the lower seed, and you can kind of play your way back into the main bracket,
that's it. That's it.
something like
Fundamentally,
that.
yeah, yeah.
I don't know. I don't know how I feel about doing such an esoteric format. If you're trying to kind of, make the game more accessible, I kind of feel like you just need to do kind of a straight bracket.
I don't think when you go into your fans, I think the divisions thing is really obvious to American fans are used to that format.
Sure.
And even if you're not, even if you're somebody who just lives in a bubble of European soccer, it's not hard to work out what a regional division would operate like, and that you get a playoff spot for winning your regional division. I don't think you want to be having to explain all the time to fans how your playoffs work, because
I agree.
I mean,
Yeah.
I know plenty of English people who've got into the NFL over the next few years. None of them have been confused about how the playoffs work,
No.
and
No. It's just I don't think they like the aggregate scoring thing,
right,
but they want to create a format where you can have more playoff games, where more teams can have home playoff games. So without aggregate scoring, you kind of end up in best of 3 situations like they have now.
yeah.
So
Which I don't mind, actually. I don't mind the best of three.
yeah, it's just strange to do a best of 3 in the first round and then go to single elimination in the more important rounds.
Yeah,
It
yeah,
seems odd. And then also, like, I don't, why are they leaning so much into PKs? Like,
yeah.
does anybody like seeing a game decided that way?
No, and it's unfortunate, and I think it often depends, I think, who loses out in these situations. But if you imagined a situation where that Miami-Nashville game had ended up as a 3-3 thriller with Messi scoring a hat-trick, and then we don't see Messi again because one of his teammates missed a penalty kick, I
Right.
think people would be rethinking it very quickly at head office. But yeah,
Yeah.
it's a tricky one. It's very hard to get the playoff format because soccer isn't a game where you can do the NBA thing, which I think is also works really well. I mean, 7 is a lot, but even just doing 3 all the way through would be a toll on the players. I think that's hard to schedule for.
Yeah, and
But it's
you
interesting.
like having your kind of like Super Bowl, your MLS Cup, your single game, I guess, too. So
Yeah,
yeah, I mean, even in Champions League, you do a single final, right? So if they like having that kind of one game that everybody's watching, I suppose.
yeah. I mean, I would be tempted just to go for single games all the way through the thing.
Right, but then
You do run the
less
risk, as
revenue.
we saw in the past, that you end up with the team who finished 8th winning the MLS Cup. But that's you have playoffs.
Yeah, I think
If
it's
you're worried about that, then you just have a single league champion.
yeah, yeah. No, I think it's more just they want to have more games for more revenue.
Yeah,
It's not an easy. There's a lot of considerations, I suppose, and some of them conflict with each other. Like, what's most sporting isn't necessarily what drives the most revenue.
yeah. No, but at least we know now after yesterday and all your fine reporting with Paul on everything that went on. At least we know now that next season MLS is just on Apple TV. There's no MLS season pass, and from 27 switching to the fall to spring season, which is going to be the European calendar, people call it, but it's pretty international as well, isn't it?
So this is actually kind of a funny thing. Like after the vote, Nelson Rodriguez came in to talk to us, and we said, "So did you guys vote to go to a fall to spring calendar?" And he's like, "I don't know why you guys keep calling it fall to spring. It's summer. It's summer to spring." And we said, "Well, fall to spring is kind of just like the colloquial term in international soccer. I mean, you're from across the pond. I mean, isn't that kind of how it's generally referred to?"
I mean, it's not even discussed because that's just
Because
the way
it's
it's
just the
always
way it
been.
is, I suppose.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
But so yeah, they're calling it summer to spring now, and I think that was one of the other interesting things that happened more recently is that we thought it was going to start in August, and now it's starting in mid-July. So we're actually, it's actually starting quite a bit before the European leagues
yeah,
are gonna start. I don't know.
yeah.
You would
And
have a
those
better
window
sense than yeah. I don't know how that affects the
Well,
transfer
those
windows.
windows are open till the end of August, practically.
Right.
So
So
you
they're
could be in a situation where MLS teams are playing for 6 weeks before the window closes. So that
right.
and you're in a situation there that English clubs in the second division that start a week or two earlier than the Premier League find themselves in, which is the team they start the season with suddenly becomes very different in 5 or 6 weeks' time, you know?
Right,
So,
right. I mean, which is better than, I guess, the current situation where, you're making changes midway through your season.
yeah.
I guess it's better to bring in key pieces a few weeks into the season than, halfway through the season.
Yeah.
But it's not a clean European calendar, I guess.
No, and the other thing about it is with that kind of mid-July start is, I mean, one of the great things is that the league is not going to be running up against the Club World Cup, the Women's World Cup, the World Cup itself, the Gold Cup, the Euros, all these tournaments that are held in June, July. But they usually finish in, a typical date of a final is like July 11th.
Yeah.
If you start in a week later in MLS, maybe the players do need that winter break in the middle of the season because they're not
Right.
going to get much of one in the summer,
Right.
So,
Exactly. And, I think that their rationale for that was, we want to start our season, in good weather. And I think that this sort of allows you to, I'm speculating a little bit, but I think they'll probably schedule the northern teams. You'll get a few home games right off the rip in July and August, when teams that are in the southern part of the country don't want to have home games anyway. So maybe I'm, kind of thinking maybe that's why they decided to move the start of it up a little bit.
Yeah. Your Toronto versus Houston is taking place in July, not December, for sure.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
it's going to be interesting to see how it shakes out.
It is. MLS 3.0, Don Garber promised us, and it is starting to feel and look different. So we'll see how it all plays out. Alex, thanks very much indeed for all your insights on that and the reporting this week as well. It's been good to go through it all. We will be back with you next week with a special guest. But thanks very much indeed again, Alex, for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me.